The team grows. In late 1982, Sister Ellie Shea, an Ursuline sister, heard about the project at the Center for Spirituality and Justice, a training program for those looking to give spiritual direction. She was on staff there, as was Father Joe. I was living in New Rochelle in one of the houses on the campus site at the College of New Rochelle, but I wasn't connected with the college at that point, and I had been living there for a number of years in various ways, she said. In the spring of '82, I made a decision that I needed to move away from New Rochelle and from that community because I felt too isolated. I felt I was being moved in a different direction. I had made that clear and talked it over with the community, but I didn't know where I was going to go. But all I knew was that if I didn't make a move, I'd stay there and be stuck. She became aware of the plans for the little portion through a friend at the center and later on Father Joe. She rather liked the idea of a retreat house in the South Bronx. At that time, she said she felt too confined with what she was doing in her life. I had a desire. What I really wanted was to live in a community that was a mixed community of religious and lay people. Sister Ellie decided she needed to move on. I felt I was making myself a negative presence, but I didn't know where to go, she said. This desire eventually led her to the building in the South Bronx. She drove to the neighborhood, taking a look around. She studied the outside of the building, contemplating her options. Later on, she placed a phone call to Father Andre. I talked with Andre and Joe. I don't actually remember the conversation in the particulars, but they were interested, she said. Father Andre placed a phone call to another Ursuline sister he knew, and she said Sister Ellie would be a good fit. So then I was ready to go, Sister Ellie said. What drew her to the project was not just the mix of religious and lay people, but those whom the house would serve. For years, from 1963 to 65, I was teaching at the College of New Rochelle, and I was involved in the anti-war movement and in the anti-poverty movement. I did a lot to influence the students I was teaching about the needs of the city, she said. There were people that I knew at the East Harlem Protestant Parish and other people I knew, like Monsignor Bob Fox, a very gifted and charismatic man. So I had learned from him and from other people of the presence of God and the revelation of God in the poor. The retreat house seemed the most logical next step for her. After her initial contact with the friars, Sister Ellie waited for their decision. On New Year's Eve day in 1982, I was really anxious to hear, but I didn't want to call to appear too anxious and get turned down. I remember going to the cloisters that day for a day of prayer, and I remember a beautiful crash. I said, if this is meant to be, I am just going to pray that it will happen. And it did. She became part of the team right before the house opened in early 1983. She brought not just a woman's perspective, but also a sharp sense of humor. Of Father Joe and Sister Ellie, both had a love and compassion for the poor, which was very evident not only by their words but by their lives, said Father Andre. Sister Ellie agreed. I had a strong sense of identification with the poor. I didn't know how deeply that went in me until later years when I discovered a lot of my own poverty and my own spirit. That's one reason I was so restless at New Rochelle. I felt it was too isolated. It was all the same, and I found that the gospel came alive in the people who were poor, who lived out the gospel. So that had been in me for a long time, she said. This was a very Franciscan perspective. Article 15 of the rule states that secular Franciscans should individually and collectively be in the forefront in promoting justice by the testimony of their human lives and their courageous initiatives. In fact, Sister Ellie, who identified so strongly with the poor and had a strong avocation for peace and justice, had a huge impact on the volunteers. Again, it was the embodiment of the Franciscan charism, a dedication to making the world a better place.